Now, are our diplomats equipped for the modern world? Tom Fletcher was our man in Beirut and Britain's youngest ambassador for 200 years. He argues that the digital revolution can transform the diplomatic service and the way they promote the nation's interests overseas. Here's his soapbox.
My name is Tom Fletcher and I'm a recovering ambassador, an ex-excellency. And although I no longer work for the Foreign Office, I care deeply about diplomacy and I'm worried that people are giving up on it. And when I say diplomacy, I don't mean the maps and chaps, the stereotypes, the summits and the sound bites, the protocol and the preening. I don't even mean the Ferrero Rocher. I mean the stripped-back, raw diplomacy that goes all the way back to the first caveman who persuaded his fellow Neanderthals to stop clubbing him and go out and hunt together. We live in an age of massive technological change, of people on the move, of distrust of authority. Trump, Brexit, the rise of extremism, these are all symptoms of the uncertainty that these trends create. In previous times of massive technological change, the Industrial Revolution, the arrival of the printing press, the nations that lost were those that turned inwards. The nations that won were those that turned outwards to find new partners, new ideas, new markets. In the 20th century, we knew where the dividing line was. In the 21st, it's not between East and West, between North and South, between rich and poor, between Christianity and Islam. It is between those who believe in coexistence and those who have given up on it. Refugees, migration, terrorism. None of these great challenges will be solved by building bigger walls. All around the world, people are connecting in new ways, through Facebook, through Twitter, through Instagram, with each other and with the powerful. Diplomacy is going to have to evolve. Diplomacy is going to have to get digital, to use this extraordinary smartphone superpower to reach out, to network, to connect, and to take on the wall builders. But while ministries like this are working hard to change and to evolve, they cannot win this argument for global cooperation alone. What we now need is for everyone to think like citizen diplomats, working hard offline and online to get their voices heard in the corridors of power and beyond. Diplomacy is now much too important to be left to diplomats. So I say, over to you, Your Excellencies.
Talking about me, obviously, and Tom Fletcher joins us now in the studio. I mean, you present a very optimistic vision, your vision, in your soapbox about diplomacy. But if you look at recent events, Ukraine, Syria, the refugee crisis, hasn't diplomacy just all but failed?
Absolutely, and I was part of that failure of diplomacy on Syria, specifically as ambassador in Beirut. But for me, those are reasons, better reasons, stronger reasons for us to improve what we're doing. And, you know, I don't think if diplomacy didn't exist, we'd have to invent it. You know, we really do need people who are out there trying to provide the lubricant in the system as states and ideas and countries interact.
Does that soft power still really have an impact, though, do you think, in terms of relations and world events?
Absolutely. I mean, I was just this morning with a bunch of the Creative Industries Federation. You know, it's our fastest growing sector. When you're in an embassy, you really realise how much power that gives you. I used to often go to universities and people would harangue me about British foreign policy, but they'd be wearing Premiership kits.
That great leveller, of course.
That great leveller, rarely a West Ham kit. But.
Right, okay, let's not get into the actual teams we support. Citizen diplomats, though, what would they be and who would they be? How would it work?
Well, I think we see them all around us every day. I mean, in many of our professions, your profession, there are citizen diplomats everywhere. For me at the moment, that's anyone who's working for coexistence and against the intolerance, this growing intolerance that we see around us. So take, for example, citizens in Munich, the companies who are now providing places for Syrian refugees. That, for me, is a front line of real diplomacy now.
Right. I mean, in that sense, do you think it is the end, really? Because we talked earlier about British military intervention, that really, in the world we're inhabiting, when we look at IS, perhaps when we look at some of the cyber espionage, is it all about soft power?
No. No, because in order to deploy soft power, you also need the hard power. And we're seeing that in Syria at the moment. If you don't have a credible threat, a credible deterrent, it's much harder to get your way when you're playing poker with Putin. So you still need that hard power element, but increasingly, to succeed in the 21st century, the soft power will need to be a much larger component than in the past.
How did you react when you heard the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson telling Parliament he'd like to see demonstrations outside the Russian embassy? This, of course, over their actions in Syria.
Well, I think that's just one element, really, of the overall approach to Russia and to Syria. Look, I think there's a lot you can do through mobilising the public. And I tried to do that in Lebanon, reaching out and connecting with different people in Lebanese society to take on these big arguments. And some of that is online. I have some of my best arguments online with the Russian embassy in the UK.
Right, but the sectarian issues must be very difficult to deal with from your perspective.
Absolutely, and you're very conscious as well, I think, as an ambassador or a diplomat, tweeting that if you get it slightly wrong, you could start World War III. You've got to be very, very careful. There are big risks. But the biggest risk is not to be on there at all, to leave that terrain to our opponents.
Right. Of course, Theresa May says she's not giving a running commentary, of course, on Brexit. But what did you think of Boris Johnson's comments there? Because one of the former diplomats was very upset, said it would actually endanger staff who are abroad in some of these embassies. And I mean, in a way, it wasn't the most belligerent of comments, but do you think it's dangerous?
Well, his point was, which I think was a very fair one, was that this so-called Stop the War coalition only ever wants to stop wars when either the United States or Britain is involved, and has absolutely nothing to say about wars prosecuted by Russia in Ukraine or by Russia and its allies
but he's the Foreign
in
Secretary,
Syria.
Of course, so he holds a lot more weight in that sense.
And I understand that, but that I think was his main point. I do think that the general argument is a very strong one, and in a sense, if you wanted to think of the best example of your citizen diplomats, it would be the Olympic medalists who we saw in Manchester.
Absolutely.
I mean, what they have done for Britain's standing in the world, not just our own sense of it, but other countries' sense of it. They think of us differently now that they see that actually we're the third biggest medal winner in the world.
Right, you've been in Lebanon, and clearly that has been a very good example of a sort of British export, if you like, our Olympians. What is the view there of Britain now?
I think people see us as magnetic, and I think that's a quality that we should be proud of. We shouldn't be chasing students away. We should be chasing after students to come here. People are fascinated by the royal family. They love, as I mentioned, the Premiership. They love our creative industries as a whole, from Beckham to the Beatles to Adele to Bond. All of that, has a real talismanic power, and we should do much, much more. We should be much prouder of that. And they're curious. They enjoy London. They see us as a dynamic, trading, outward-looking nation. And the biggest threat to us at the moment is we turn our back on that key part of our DNA as a country and turn inwards. History tells us that's when you lose.
All right, Tom Fletcher, his book, Naked Diplomacy. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.